Good evening, Peoria. Welcome to Whiskey Talks. I'm so pleased today to have Travis Mohlenbrink, founder of Cayenne and all these amazing restaurants here in the Greater Peoria region. Travis, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate you guys having me on and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and so Travis, was this, so we're kind of going to go off the cuff here a little bit, but I'm just curious, has this been your lifelong dream? Did you actually think about wanting to start and run restaurants when you were a kid?
So, no. Weirdly enough, how it worked out, I definitely was involved in restaurants since I was able to have a job. So I was washing dishes at our local restaurant. That was actually like a buffet style restaurant in my hometown. And I was riding my bicycle and washing dishes when I was 14, 15 years old. And then I've kind of always sort of been involved through college and working in restaurants and the hospitality industry. But no, I was originally, I wanted to be, so I went into education, but I wanted to be a coach. I wanted to be a baseball coach. I love the game of baseball. I played my whole life. And so I went in really to education for the wrong reason, because I wanted to be involved in the sporting aspect of things, not in the teaching of our youth, which is probably the passion you need to have when you're going into education. But I did my student teaching, and honestly, I did not like it at all. And quite honestly, even above and beyond that, I did student teaching and helped coach a girls softball team. And I got a little bit of a taste of the way parents can treat coaches in the school systems. And I was just like, I don't think this is going to be for me at all. But I was actually working in a restaurant at the time and serving as well for it's good extra cash for high school, college people and young adults. And so I already sort of liked that. And my manager, the district manager, always told me if I ever decided not to go into teaching, that they're always looking for young, energetic people to get involved. It was a corporate restaurant, but to get involved on their team, either running restaurants or opening restaurants and so on and so forth. So I told him, I was like, teaching is not going to work for me. And I think I'd like to maybe see what you have and pursue something in the hospitality industry. And I did. And, as they say, kind of the rest is history. It took me a long time to get from point A to point B, but that's what got the journey started.
So how old were you at that point in time?
Yeah, so 22. And
okay.
Just kind of, finishing up school and just ready for a fun challenge. Weirdly enough, I was just straight out of college going into the hospitality industry. I was just lucky enough to land a job that, I was making more money than my friends that were going into their career. And definitely I was making more money than I would have as a teacher. And so I kind of just got lucky falling into that. I say lucky. It was definitely long, grueling hours. There's a reason why the restaurant industry looks for young, energetic people, because it's a lot of work. I was helping open restaurants, and it's a lot of work. It is a lot of fun and it's very rewarding. But I don't know that I could pull those hours today that I was pulling back then, for sure.
And so, you were working, and what was you said you were washing dishes. Did you actually do front of house too?
Yeah, so I've done, honestly, I've cooked, I've washed dishes, I've bussed, I've managed front of the house, and managing front of the house is really what I did most. I was working for the most I've ever done front of the house management for the longest period of time, besides working for myself, was with the Panera Bread Group. So I was working for that group. Actually, that's what kept me in Central Illinois, was I got a job with the franchisee that was opening up all the Paneras in the Central Illinois area. And I helped open a lot of those restaurants. I opened a couple of them here in Peoria, helped open one in Decatur, one in Bloomington. So that was all front of house and really opening and operating. So I learned a lot definitely learned a lot from them. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much did every aspect of what you could possibly do in the restaurant field before I decided the hours that I was working for other people were just too much. That basically I'd said, if I'm going to work these hours, I'm going to do it for myself. And I had a child around that same time, and it was really just time to figure out, where do I want to be? What am I going to do, but for myself? And that's when I opened Cracked Pepper Catering. It was a business that I could open part-time at first. So I didn't have to take that huge leap that a lot of entrepreneurs really need to do, which is, I know, like, that's one of the questions I get asked a lot. Like, what made you take that first big leap to, quit a job where you were actually doing well and decide to go into business for yourself? And, I feel like I take a lot of risks, but that risk was very calculated for me because I was definitely able to continue working, do catering sort of on the side. And as that side catering business grew, with the help of a couple part-time people that I knew in the area that helped me do that, I was able to then get to that level where I could take that leap and not have as much risk as I would have if I would have just dove in right away. So, that's sort of how I got into it full time, was just slowly and evolved. And honestly, that's really how I built my restaurants. Is I got into catering at first. Then we built a little cafe right next to our catering kitchen down on Northeast Adams Street. And then, which, by the way, that location was never meant to be a retail location for people to walk in and out. When I first rented it, I literally looked for where I could find the cheapest rent in town, and that was it. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter to me where it's at. It doesn't matter, kind of, a whole lot of things that would matter to me now didn't then, because I was just opening up a catering kitchen. And so, that's why I ended up there. But, thank goodness the people of Peoria and the area were so great to me and just wanted our product. It allowed me to open the little cafe, and then I expanded the little cafe, and then I opened, a few years later, I opened Salt in Peoria Heights, which is now Cayenne. And then a couple years later after that, I opened Sugar, which was sort of one of the first, well, really the first new business in the warehouse district when they were kind of finishing up the streets and doing all the renovations down in the warehouse district. A couple years later, then I opened the Warehouse on State, which is my event center, along with, like, a few months after that time, because those were both projects were going at once. Then I bought Peoria Brewing and turned that into Industry Brewing. And then honestly, within a few months of that, I flipped Salt into Cayenne. So, I mean, everything just sort of organically happened really slow. And I was able to kind of take cash flow from one business and put it into the next, open that business, and then take that cash flow from those two to open the third, and those three to open the fourth, so on and so forth. And that's really how I went about getting everything open.
So Travis, you were saying that you're not from Peoria, and then the way you came to Peoria was through the work that you were doing with Panera. So can you share where you're originally from?
Yeah, so I'm about 2 hours east of here. And the town when I was born, I grew up in a town for about 14 years called Beaverville. Beaver, like the animalville. And I guess at one point there were a lot of beavers in the area. I don't know. But I grew up there for 14 years, then moved to a town like 10 miles away, which is where our high school and schools were at, called Donovan. And that's the name of the school that I went to and graduated from, was Donovan Elementary and High School. Really kind of in between Watseka and Kankakee, if you're familiar with those two towns. But yes, very, very small, 32 kids in my graduating class.
Wow. And so I'm curious, as a kid growing up in central Illinois, did you have your own business? Were you doing anything, lemonade stands?
I did do lemonade stands growing up a few times with my neighbor friend, for sure. But yeah, no, I for some reason, I guess when I was working for other restaurants or corporations and traveling and opening up places, not just in central Illinois, but I kind of traveled throughout the country for another company called Restaurants America. And I didn't know for sure that I was ever going to open my own thing, but I always like kept notes of places that I went to that I liked. And I always like had, saw something that I thought was super cool or very unique, or just the concept as a whole. I would take pictures with my phone, back on the flip phone days. And, so I've actually, funny enough, like I still have that phone. And sometimes I resort back to just like going and flipping it open and checking out some of the pictures I took, and just seeing sort of like, I knew I liked it at the time, to see if that maybe there's some ideas that I forgot about that I took pictures of years and years ago. But yeah, I mean, I guess I always maybe subconsciously knew I was going to do something on my own, because I definitely like really paid attention to the way things ran, and the way other restaurants and hospitality businesses ran their operations.
So, your academic career was headed towards teaching, right? You kind of decided because you're like, hey, I want to train the next generation. But then at some point you discovered actually not really my cup of tea, especially in the sports arena. And then how long did you work for until you opened your first side gig? Because Paul Singh that I had just interviewed a week or so ago, he was just sharing that most businesses start as side hustles. And true to that point, yours started as a side hustle while you had your day job. So at what point, because, and then also, I will also say, and this is probably getting ahead of myself, but all the training working for somebody else in this particular industry ended up being the actual practical on the job experience and learning to actually funnel into the successes that you have. So what was that like for you at that point?
Yeah. So I guess I was about 7 years that I worked for other companies and was constantly learning. And I definitely, one thing I've done with my companies is I've taken a lot of the things that I thought were super important and vital to the operations of my own places. And I've, integrated those into the way we run our businesses. And I kind of threw away the things that I thought were I was operating for these bigger companies. And there were just days where I would sit in front of a computer entering numbers that it just was, to me, was a kind of a waste of my time. And so, I really kind of took what I thought worked and implemented those, and took what I thought didn't or was a waste of time for my managers. And we don't do those things. And you're right. Like, I mean, it was on the best on the job training I could have ever had. I am amazed today still when I hear of somebody that's never been in the hospitality or restaurant business before opening a full service restaurant, because I know that without knowing what I learned from other places for years, there's no way I could have been successful in operating mine. So, that's always, yeah. And I'm not saying there aren't people who can do it, because obviously some people can, but, gosh, it's just, it's a lot of, there's a lot of things that go into it that on the operation side and the business side of running a restaurant that people don't think about. And, without those years of learning that, it would have been, for me, I feel like it would have been next to impossible. Because, if it's one thing to have a great pizza recipe, or think that you're like the best grilling steak person in the world. And every time you have family over, they want that steak that you cook, or they want you to make that pasta that everybody loves, or that salad. That's definitely part of it. But that's honestly probably one of the smaller parts of being able to be successful in this business. That's great. You got to have a good product to put in front of people, but to be successfully running that business and being able to put the product in front of people and pay other people around you. And that's just, it's a whole nother thing. And that's the part that was vital for me to kind of learn before I did my own thing.
So the corporate experience that you had, working with all these large corporations and setting up restaurants really paved the way for the success that you brought to your own restaurants, because you had the real life experiences in addressing the issue. So the next question I was going to ask was, tell me more about the initial challenges that you faced in setting up your own business. What was that like?
So, yeah, I mean, I guess I always knew it was going to be a lot of work, but never had a clue of the amount of time and work that it really took to be successful, to be able to stop what I was doing and be okay with making less money than I was making before, knowing that I could live off it, but also having the drive and knowing that at this point, I'm going to do everything it takes to make this work. And, there were a lot of weeks, there were a lot of months that I made huge sacrifices in life. I said earlier, I had a son at the time and decided it was time to kind of settle in and be here in Central Illinois and for him. And, there were a lot of weekends that, he came to work with me because we were catering a wedding somewhere, and he was like sitting on a milk crate in the corner on my phone playing stuff, or on an iPad or something, just keeping him busy where I could constantly see him. Those are things I look back on now, and he sort of remembers some of those times, but it was just, I was like, God, what am I doing? I didn't go out with friends for 2 years. I mean, it was like, hey, Thursday night, we're going to have a happy hour at Buffalo Wild Wings and watch whatever game is on. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be at Gordon Foods picking up food for the next day, because my cash flow was where I had to basically see what we had going on the next day and then go buy the product for it and then perform the event or whatever it was, get the food where it needed to be on the following day. And, so like the following day, it's consisted of me cooking, I was the original cook, chef, whatever you want to call me, at Crack Pepper. And so, I did the purchasing, took the calls, I went and picked up the product, came back the next day, made the product, delivered it to wherever it needed to go, and then kind of waited for a couple hours to see what was going to take, kind of shake out for the next day. And then was back to buying whatever those products were again. And a lot of times it was like one hour at the Gordon Food Service store and then another hour at Sam's Club, depending on who had the best deals on whatever at the time. It was like every penny counted. And, that's just how it was. And I mean, there were times where I had to sleep there overnight because we had early morning things and I was getting things prepped for whatever it might be the night before. We did everything from scratch, which we still do. And so like I'm baking cookies at 8:00 at night for the lunches the next day, and just, trying to get some things done that I can, knowing that I wouldn't have enough time to get it done the next morning. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely an eye opener. And, when I open up places now, it's not that anymore, but, it's still a lot of work, but it's not what it was then. I mean, it was some very interesting days and nights of my life of trying to get a business up and running, for sure.
Yeah, Travis, you really make a good point, right? Like the cooking of the steak or the cookies or whatever it is that all your friends and family appreciate is very different from running a restaurant. And so, like you're saying, bursting that bubble very quickly, especially when you don't have that sort of hands-on restaurant experience. So then, that leads me to my next question. So what would you say to those of our audience watching, hey, I want to start a food business or perhaps a pop-up restaurant of some sort? What would you say to, of course, yourself when you're a lot younger starting out, and how have you learned from that?
If it's something that you're going to do without the experience of being able to work in places previous, reach out to people in the industry. I mean, a lot of places will let people come in and just kind of shadow. I've done that before where I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, can I pick your brain on a handful of things? Or can I come in and see how you have your kitchen set up or whatever? And I've actually started a consulting company because of that, because I've had so many people reach out and want to talk and sit down. And so, I actually have a way that I can help people out really without charging them. There's some ways that we can do things over like vendor rebates and things where maybe I get the vendor rebates for a year based on the help that I give them. But, I have sheets made today that like scheduling sheets in Excel formats that we use, that if I would have had those back in the day, would, things that would save me so much time, that, even just forecasting software that we've created, that we can look and see sort of what we did last year, what we think we're going to do this year. And then it helps schedule people accordingly to what that is, all these things that I really didn't think I needed or just didn't have back when I started. Reach out to somebody that has those resources, and most people are willing to just share. And I have many and many times. But there's just, again, some people don't know what's a chef get paid in town. So you have somebody saying they want to pay a chef $160,000 a year, and it's like, that's great, but you now, I'm just telling you, now you need to do $3 million a year in sales to be able to support that type of, and it's like, okay, you start doing the math on weekly numbers, and it's like, oh, that's probably not going to work here in Peoria. So just things like that, just people aren't really sure which way to go. And there's so many people that are willing to help, and just don't be scared to ask for help.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Travis. And you talked about a lot about the restaurant operation. So I'm curious, we've been through a life-changing, momentous event of the global pandemic. How have you been doing? How have your restaurants been doing? What have you been innovating, I guess, to stay afloat?
So yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting year, and almost to the day, right? When we sort of had to shut down that first round, it's been a roller coaster of emotions. It's been, there's been some good things that have come out of it. There's been some bad things that have come out of it. But I had to turn into, almost a year ago today, as we said, into instead of a boss and a leader. I still had to be those things, but I had to turn into a counselor, a support system, a better leader than I've ever been. Someone who is, I talked and was in every restaurant with people multiple times every day, where sometimes there'd be a week before I walk into, depending on what I have going on, I might not go into Cayenne for a week or 10 days, whatever. I had to be there every day, and not just to say that I'm here to help support. What do we need to continue to go service today? But it was more of a, I'm here to support you. How you doing? What's going on? How can I help? We really felt like in the hospitality industry, and a lot of other operators I know felt the same way. We really felt like overall, like if you took year today to a year ago, the restaurant industry was really a little bit different than most industries, and the way everything kind of went down. So we were almost on a little island on our own to try to figure a lot of things out for a lot of this pandemic. And I think a lot of operators handled it differently. Some places just said, you know what, if this is how we have to operate, we're just going to shut down until we can sort of be back to what things are supposed to be with, the way restaurants are ran, when we can have more people in, or so on and so forth. Some people tried to turn their business a little bit and change some of the things that they did, change menu items that are better suited for to go. That way, you're not, if you're a steakhouse, probably not a great to go item, especially when you're spending $30, $40, $50 on a steak. I think that's tough for people to, swallow for to go food. And that's, I did that actually at time. We kind of changed that menu, and I mean, we were doing fried chicken, we were doing, a couple different pasta dishes. So we actually limited our menu, and they were all new items that we'd never done before. And again, the good of that is a couple of those items actually ended up on our normal menu when we sort of reopened, because they went over well. So, there are some things that end up shaking out of the trees that were pretty good. But yeah, I mean, it was, even this last round of shutdowns that were announced. I mean, I actually talked to my staff everywhere and said, what do you guys think? What do you want to do? And I mean, it was a month before Christmas. I mean, literally, I walked into one restaurant with two servers crying when they heard what was going on. How am I going to get my kids Christmas presents this year? What are we going to, it just, it was a crazy year. And, we're going to come out just fine. And luckily enough, I think, the central Illinois area definitely had some places not make it, but I think for the majority of the places around, I think they were able to get through this, and hopefully they're going to continue to be strong and stick through. We have 100%. We saw a change about 3 weeks ago as the weather started to get nicer, and I also think as more and more people get vaccinated every day, and again, everything I read and hear, our county and our area has been a leader, not just in Illinois, but in the country as far as getting people vaccinated, which doesn't surprise me at all, knowing the hospital systems that we have in this area and how well they operate and how many great people are involved in those hospitals and those systems. It doesn't surprise me that they've done so well with it. But it sure is, I sure am thankful that they've done so well with it, because as more and more people get vaccinated, we definitely see on our end, sort of things getting back closer to normal. Definitely not normal, but getting closer to normal, which is just something that I couldn't really say throughout this process up until a few weeks ago. People I haven't seen for a year now, I'm seeing out again saying, hey, we were vaccinated, so we're ready to come and have dinner out again and enjoy life and be social, and and that's really great. And it's you're just waiting, for me anyway, I'm just waiting for so long to start hearing some and seeing some positive things. And honestly, the last few weeks has been, that's what it's been. I mean, a lot of positive things happening, and people feeling a lot better about trying to get back closer to normal. And the sooner we can, I think the better for not just our economy, but for the psyche of people, and just social aspect of what people endure on a week of just their life at home, compared to being able to feel okay to get out and talk to people again and interact. And I think as a hospitality guy, that's why we do what we do. We supply that place that people can go and enjoy a birthday meal with their kids or grandkids. And, that stopped in this past year. Grandpa and grandma were not going out for, even when, the 6 feet apart tables, they were, at risk, and they weren't going out and enjoying those times with their family and with their grandkids and their kids. And, that stinks, because that's why we do what we do. I love seeing, a party of 8 with grandpa, grandma, mom, dad, a couple kids, and maybe an aunt and uncle or two. And that party of 8 now is a party of maybe 3 or 4 of just the immediate family going and celebrating. And, someday grandpa and grandma will be able to do it again. And, hopefully we're starting, like I said, we're starting to see that's, starting to come around. And it's nice, because if we can't be a part of people's special moments, and if we can't be a part of just that fun social interaction that people really do need. Industry brewing is a great example. Our beer garden, when it's 5 degrees outside, that's not a great place to go hang out. When it's 65 degrees outside and you want to start a fire in the fire pit, have a few craft beers and a burger or two, or something, like, it's a pretty cool atmosphere back there to go and hang out at. So, that's why we do it. Like, I love to see people enjoying themselves, having a good time, and we're getting closer to that happening on a daily basis, and it's a good thing to see.
Yeah, you're totally right on the money, right? Like, it's not just going out to eat, but it's this whole entire tier of social engagement in the community, with friends, with family and extended family. And that's really at the heart of the hospitality industry. And of course, with the global pandemic, there have been challenges, but as an entrepreneur, We have this idea of resilience and grit, that we make lemonade out of the lemons that life throws at us. How have you, as a restaurateur and also a business owner, have you improved in terms of learning from this global experience? What has changed in your business for the better?
Yeah, I think that we definitely have realized that some of our ways of operating could change. One, we definitely realized that we probably can do things a little leaner and meaner, meaning when we first laid off a lot of people, which unfortunately I think a lot of restaurants did, as the summer kicked this past summer of 2020, as the weather started to warm up and things sort of started to slowly reopen, we started calling people back, and we realized that not everyone was going to come back. And at the time, I think there was a $600 a week unemployment benefit on top of the state unemployment benefit. And, fortunately, whatever it is, whatever you want to say, but that ended up being a lot of times more money than a $14 an hour dishwasher, line cook, whatever it might be, would get on a normal 35-hour week. So we had most of the people came back. Some of them decided they wanted to not come back and stay on unemployment. And we realized that a lot of those people that didn't come back, once we got things rolling again, must not have been pulling their weight, because we were able to do things without certain people back in those positions. So we definitely realized, I'll just give you one example. On a Friday or Saturday night, we used to have 2 dishwashers at time, because we felt like that's what we needed, and they were able to, kind of keep things clean and get the job done. Where now we have a completely different person back there that's really good, that we realize his value, and we're paying him more than we were paying the other 2 before. But he's happy to do it for more money and be able to get the job done by himself, which in turn actually saves me a few dollars. He makes a few dollars more. It's a win-win for both of us, right? So that's just one example of, there's a handful of those types of things that we found. But I've gone to every vendor that we have and said, hey, you're going to have to help me out this year, do whatever we need to do. And, I found that there are ways that I've cut some costs down there, the things that I never knew I could do before, that people, maybe it wasn't me that figured it out, but, talking to my insurance person that said, hey, we insure another restaurant, here's what they're doing, and it's saving them $2,000 this year. I could save you about the same. What do you think? It's coverage is a little different here, but it's absolutely and I'll probably keep that moving forward forever. Right. So there was a lot of things that were brought up, and just in this community, I would say in a normal time, restaurateurs in this community are pretty competitive, would be a good word to say. And when all this happened last year and on through, really even through the summer, there were a lot of people that I thought, I heard that guy doesn't even really care for me because I opened a restaurant 3 blocks from his place, and I told somebody he didn't like. Well, that person's reaching out to me saying, hey, we're in this together. What are you doing for this? And I did the same thing to other people that I knew. And, I think it brought a lot of us closer, because we're all trying to figure out what each other were doing that's working, and how to help get through this whole thing better. And a lot of us did it together. We had multiple Zoom meetings with the health department, and somebody, hey, what about this, and this? We probably should get the health department involved and see what their thoughts are. Great point. I was thinking the same thing. We all get together, send an email, have the meeting with the health department. There was definitely more camaraderie in the hospitality industry than I've ever seen here before. And that was nice to see too.
So, you really touch on a key point that I've seen on TV, as well as a lot of the friends that are in the industry, restaurant industry, culinary arts, and stuff like that. It's the culture of family in the industry, right? You're taking this to an entirely different level of the idea of sled dogs. Everybody pulls equal weight. Um, and so to your point with regards to the employees who didn't end up actually wanting to come back to work, maybe that there was a misalignment in terms of culture, perhaps that they were not actually pulling their weight. And so, um, what is your advice, I guess, or what have you learned in terms of creating a right culture, or the right culture for you as a business owner in your business? What do you tell your staff? Because ultimately, your staff represent you and represent the brand and the restaurant or the enterprise to the customer. What do you tell them?
So we just did a sort of an end of the year meeting slash celebration, basically to celebrate the end of 2020 because it was so crazy I mean, not just me, honestly, like at the end of the day, like I know I'll figure things out no matter if every one of my restaurants had to close, I'll figure things out and be fine. Like I have that kind of faith in myself and I know what I'm capable of doing. The thing that was really scary for me were all the other people that this is what they do. This is all they've ever done. And if we don't succeed or are able to stay in business, like when all this help is gone, because eventually it's going to go away and unemployment's going to be back to what the state pays. And when all that's said and done, I feel it's my responsibility to keep these people engaged and employed and moving on and moving forward and hopefully moving up with our companies to do bigger and better things and make more money. And we had this end of the year party and it was very emotional for me when I spoke at the end of the night, because there were people in that room that were out of work for a period of time, but they were still there because they wanted to be a part of when we can hire them back, they want to be a part of it. And I can't say enough about our management team that I have at every place. I have basically somebody in charge of the kitchen, whether it's a chef or a kitchen manager, and somebody in charge of the front of the house, general manager or shift supervisor, whatever, on every shift that we have at every restaurant. And I kept all those people involved and employed and engaged through this whole process. And when I wasn't there, I know they were hearing a lot of the things that I had to deal with when I was in the restaurant at that particular place. And, just thanking them and talking to them and telling them how important they are to me. And, it's one thing, again, to be that guy that, I take pride in the fact that, and I know it sounds crazy to some people that have worked like in the corporate field their whole life, but I take pride in the fact that never at least out of my fault at all, have I ever had to ask an employee, can I pay you? I know payday's Friday. Can I pay you Monday? Never have I had a check bounce. Never have. I mean, these things that some people might take for granted, but as an individual entrepreneur and restaurateur, those things have never happened. And to be able to say like, hey, I'm just happy that we're getting to a point where everyone's back to work or close to everyone's back to work. Hopefully we can put this behind us sooner than later, and just, move on and move forward. And for those of you like that had a rough year as I did, I'm sorry. I wish there's more I could do, and I'll continue to, try to do everything I can to make sure that we're stable for the future moving forward.
So that's a great segue, because my next question is, so what's next for you, Travis? What is next for your restaurants? What do you envision for the next 6 months to a year?
So I have I wasn't planning on opening anything else up, and I have an opportunity in front of me that I'm probably going to be inking. It's very close to be on paper soon. I won't get into where it's at or what, but I will tell you, I am going to be diving more into something maybe just a tiny step above the feel and the atmosphere of a time. So not white tablecloth, but a little bit fancier, I guess, but still very fun and social. But we're going to be getting into the steak and seafood business here, I think, by the end of the year. Some really cool ideas for some really fresh, great seafood items, and have a few higher end steaks, maybe some things that A5 Wagyu, things like that, but also just, a good prime ribeye that's not $100. But we are going to offer some $100 steaks that are aged in A5 and that absolutely melt in your mouth. We're going to be flying in a lot of fresh seafood. I really want this to be, honestly, not just the crown jewel of what I have, but like a crown jewel for Central Illinois. I think this is going to be a pretty outstanding place.
So you really hit a point, because I enjoy good food, and it's such a pleasure to connect with you here. And it's really strange, right? Because I tell a lot of people, hey, we can get the freshest seafood from either coast and internationally here in the Midwest. And they look at me with puzzled eyes. They're like, how, what, how, what? There's no sea here,
Uh-huh.
right? I guess, do you feel like the customers here there's an appetite for this high level of experience in, wagyu and seafood? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So here's what I feel. I feel like when I had Salt opened about 12 years ago, and it ran for a number of years, and it was always that restaurant for me that I was never going to get rich at. It just kind of hummed along, and we had our regulars that came in, but that concept was, I mean, it was eclectic, and that's probably putting it mildly. I mean, there were some pretty far out things on that menu, but that was the concept. That's what it was supposed to be, right? So, and don't get me wrong, we had a handful of things that you could have went to a lot of more fine dining restaurants and bought, but I mean, we were doing foie gras s'mores there as a dessert. So I mean, it's literally liver in a s'mores, So I mean, we were doing some things that were a little bit out there. We were probably, I know we were the first person in Peoria to have pork belly on a menu, and now it's like pork belly is everywhere. It's anywhere you go, there's something pork belly. But we had an appetizer that was a pork belly based appetizer. That actually, there was a quail egg on top of each piece of pork belly. I mean, it was a beautiful appetizer. It was awesome. But we would literally get that appetizer sent back at times from people saying that there was a little fatty piece of fat on their pork belly. And it's like, yes, you're right. They're supposed, and you can't say those things to the customer. But, it's like, yeah, they're like, yeah, I bit in and there's like a chunk of fat on the back. So I'm like, yeah, that's pork belly, but you can't say that. So, a lot of examples like that where people just, it wasn't time for that restaurant yet. And I think Peoria has grown culinary wise in the last 10 years, leaps and bounds. And I don't think that's just Peoria and Central Illinois. I think with the Food Network, and all these shows that are about restaurants and food. I mean, you can't, just normal television anymore, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, you can't, there's not a night that there's probably not a show that revolves around food on those networks. And then you have networks that are just completely dedicated to food. So many people now consider themselves foodies that never before did they even care about food. People went out to get food because it's a necessary thing to have to survive, and for the social aspect. And now people seek out who's got the new thing, where's a place I can go and get something that I've never had before. Where's, is anyone doing a poke restaurant? They open up anyone doing poke around, because I see it on TV all the time, and it's fun and it's hot and it's so people are very aware of like new trends because of those networks. And so that's part of why I decided, when I closed Salt and turned it into Cayenne, which was a great thing for me to do business wise. I said at the time, I'm like, I don't know that I would ever get back into like more fine dining or anything a little even more upscale than say like a Time, because it just, again, you had your regulars who enjoyed it when it was Salt. But now it's just a different, the clientele in this area is different, and people are more aware and they get it. And I think a lot of people are going to know what A5 Wagyu is, where 10 years ago, it was around, but not many people even knew what that was. So, that's the great thing, is anymore you can do about anything you want in the hospitality industry in a town the size of Peoria. And it has a chance to fly, where before maybe it didn't, because it just was the unknown. That the unknown factor kept some people away or turned them off.
You're absolutely right, Travis. And historically, Peoria has been known to be a place of experimenting and piloting and prototyping, right? And so to that point that you were talking about the experimental food scene, with the molecular gastronomy and all these other crazy things that Rennie Redzepi is doing in Noma and Denmark and Copenhagen. Do you have an innovation kitchen space that you're continually testing here? What do you have anything like that?
Yeah. So, well, this Thursday I have a round one of tasting for a new menu rollout at Industry Brewing for our spring and summer menu. We are constantly, I think we have a new menu coming out today at Time. And again, I mean, we're talking about maybe 4 items, that are changed on the menu. Cayenne, I think, is going to be Thursday or Friday. They have their spring menu that rolls out. So at least twice a year at every restaurant, we do sort of a refresh. And so what happens is I get with the manager and whoever the kitchen manager is. And actually now we have a corporate chef that actually helps out with menu development as well. And then our food provider, because it's tough to do something if we decide we want to make a certain product and then we can't get it from our, Cisco Foods or, who we're buying product from. So we all kind of get together. We look at some new items. What do we want to do? We look at a product mix and see what wasn't selling over the last year or 6 months, whatever it might be, and look at, taking some of those things off. Some things, even when they don't sell, will never come off the menu. So like bone marrow at Time, it's one of those things, we don't sell a lot of it, but the people who come in for it, absolutely, they get it every time they're there. They love it. And to me, it's such a great item. Again, I don't think anyone else in Peoria does it. And so it doesn't matter to me how many of those we sell. We're always going to keep it on the menu because it's one of those things that make Time what it is. So we look at all those things. We sit down and we have an initial tasting of some of these ideas that we talked about on that initial meeting. We'll eat those things together. We'll kind of dissect them and see what we liked, what we didn't like. And then we'll have a second round of tasting. And then usually on the second round, we can get it down. If let's just say we're going to replace 5 items. By the second round, we can probably solidify 3 of those 5. And then there's usually a third round where it's like 1 or 2 things left out of those 5s that we still need to tweak. And it might be a tweak because we weren't crazy about the way it came out and the way it tasted. Might not like the way it looked. Might had to order a different vessel to actually serve it on because it didn't look right with anything we had. Or it might be sort of a snag or a holdup to actually make on the kitchen line. So those are all things like, we got to look at how many fried items we have, because on a busy Friday night, if your menu is heavy on fried items, well, I mean, I only have space for so many fryers on a kitchen line. So we have to really make sure that we're not adding another fried item because they're already getting backed up. The fryer's already getting backed up, or the flat top gets backed up. So let's not put another flat top item. Matter of fact, let's take one off and put an item that goes on the grill. So those are all things we figure out. And then after that third tasting, then usually we've got it all pretty well figured out. We do the recipe, goes in our recipe book. And then about a week later, we let them play around with it. About a week later, then we try to put it on the menu and it goes live. So that's sort of the whole process. And that's one of the fun things for me. That's one of the things that I look forward to. Honestly, part of the reason I'm doing this next restaurant is because that's what like gets my juices flowing. That's what makes me excited to get up in the morning. I get to a point after a couple of years of not doing anything new that my creative side starts to like itch me a little bit. I get that itch, and I'm like, all right, I have 1,000 ideas always, but I just start looking a little bit harder for that next thing that I think, or that next location, or that next deal that I can get put together that fits one of these things that I'm thinking about. And then, so it's for me, it's really great, and it's exciting that this summer I'm going to be working on this new concept, because to me, that's the fun part for me, because I do everything from menu development all the way. I do all the decor in the restaurants. I do all the layouts of where everything goes. I set up my own kitchens. I set up the way, where the bathrooms go, where the bar's at. Like I do all that. So like almost architecture wise, so because of that, I do all that. It's a lot of stuff to do, but that's the creative part of what I can like, release that energy and do that with. And it's really fun.
Yeah, so you really covered the gamut of all the things that you have to do. For our audiences watching, if you're looking to start a restaurant, it's not about just cooking, it's everything.
Yeah.
Everything else. And if you're not passionate about the everything else as much as you're passionate about the food, maybe you might want to go work for somebody else as opposed to opening a restaurant.
For sure.
The one thing I want to talk about that you highlighted, which was, you made observations that there were there were certain things on your menu that were not selling. What role does measuring, the performance of the restaurant, the food and the service and everything else, what does that play in terms of your evaluation and continuous improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's smart. For any business, if they have a product that's, maybe obviously I didn't put something on a menu that I thought was going to be a dog, right? That's what we call the products that aren't selling. I don't go into a new menu rollout and put something on thinking, this will be something that doesn't sell a lot of, and we'll just kind of run with it. I put it on because I really think it's going to be great. But that doesn't always hold true. So, I think any business that should be continuing to look at what's selling, and not only what's selling, but, sometimes I may have an item that sells less than another, but because of what type of item it is, the profit margin. So let's just say a high-end pork chop. We have a pork chop that we sell at time, and it's great. I mean, it's 1.5 inches thick. It's bone in. It's a beautiful piece of meat. Our percentage on what we make on that pork chop is much less than, say, the percentage of what we would make on a burger. The amount that we actually charge for it is over twice the amount of our burger. But we make a better percentage. So if we were to sell 10 burgers and 10 pork chops, even though, so that in this example, they're both the same, I would make a lot more money on selling the 10 pork chops, even though the percentage of what I have to put into buying that product is less. So those are all things that in the hospitality industry, you have to look at. It's not only just, oh gosh, we only sold 60 of those last month. That's one of our lower selling items. Maybe we ought to pull that off the menu. Oh, wait a minute. That item we make $16 every time we sell one, where a burger we make $4. So you got to sell 4 times more. Or do we sell 4 times more burgers? And if not, then burgers may have to come off the menu instead of that item, right? So, and you just have to be knowledgeable of that's what's going on. I mean, and that's something I look at least every 2 weeks, for sure, every 3 to 4 weeks, of just kind of seeing, what it is out there that's going. And that's the great thing about being an individual owner for a mom and pop style place, because if tomorrow I decide something really stinks and it's not selling well, as soon as I can take it off the menu and put something on, I can do it. Whereas like with franchisees, that if you own a franchise for Panera Bread and something doesn't sell, you have to wait till they decide as a corporation that they're going to take that item off and tell you what you're going to replace it with, right? And that might not be for 4 months. So, that was another part of what's fun for me is, we can, and I tell that's one of the honestly, that's one of the most coveted advantages when I hire somebody that comes from a corporate background in the kitchen to come and work for us as like a kitchen manager. Is you're not going to get specs on 5 new items every other month that you have to perfect and train everybody on. You're going to come up with those 5 new items with me and a couple other people that you love and that you want to do, and we're going to take 5 of them off that doesn't work for you and doesn't work for the restaurant. And if you want to do it tomorrow instead of next week or 3 weeks from now, then we'll do it tomorrow. We'll just, and they like that. Like, they like that freedom. They like that creativity that, that I enjoy and have fun with as well.
And so you're again, reinforcement of the right culture, and really it's a culture of collaborating and co-creating, which I really appreciate. So trick question, very often servers come to the table and say, hey, we have a special. Should I order the special, Travis? What are your thoughts?
So at any of my restaurants, 100% yes. So usually all of our specials, we are actually things that we bring in to do for that special. And I know where you're getting at with this, which is like, hey, last week's leftover, this is this week's special. And I totally understand that's a common thing for some places, but that's not what we do at any of my places. So absolutely, I would tell you to get the special. If it sounds good, get it every time.
Awesome. And the final question for the hour is, what would you say to those who are, after watching this Whiskey Talks, are thinking of getting into the industry? What would be your one piece of sage advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, besides what I said earlier with just really trying to get your feet wet, working with other people, or talk to other restaurateurs in the area. Some might be hesitant to talk to you and help if you're planning to open a place. Others, like myself, will absolutely sit down over a cup of coffee and hear what you're trying to do, and I'll tell you with my full honesty what I think. But I mean, that's the important part, and that's key. But the other thing is just, be patient. Don't try to just rush through opening something like a restaurant. It doesn't, the time, it takes time to get everything perfected. And just because you know how to make that awesome pasta at your house, for 5 people, 6 people, maybe, now you have to figure out how, you have to take the time to get that same product and make it the same way you do in your house for 6 for a restaurant of 60 or 150. So, and that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, that's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of practice to scale things up and to figure out what you can do ahead compared to what you at home. You probably do it all as you're making it, and it's all for. In a restaurant setting, you may have to, those noodles may have to be half cooked first, right? Before, so those are things you have to have the knowledge to do or figure out on your own or get help to figure out. And once you do, I will tell you that Central Illinois is probably, in my opinion, the most gracious, the most supportive. There's not, I don't know that I could have done what I did here in the last 15 years anywhere else in the country. You said it earlier, Peoria is kind of known to have those places that are new and innovative, and people are trying those things out. And if it plays in Peoria, how how the saying goes. But it's true. I mean, there's a reason why Peoria has all the individually owned restaurants that we do, because people around here support it. And maybe just a hop, skip, and a jump away in Bloomington, which is kind of known for like all the chains that they have. I mean, there's a reason. I mean, they must not support the mom and pop places as well as Peoria. I mean, and we just lucked out because again, with all the Food Network and everything that the way things are and people getting more adventurous with food, and Peoria in this area has all these individually owned places that are all very unique. A lot of them putting out some awesome product with an awesome atmosphere. I mean, I just think compared to a lot of other places in Central Illinois, Peoria is the place that will support your dream and what you're trying to do. As long as you put your work and your time into it, they will support it.
Thank you, Travis. And that's all we have time for today. We will catch you at the next Whiskey Talks in about a month. All right, bye for now.